Val James's path to the NHL took various twists and turns, but when he arrived, he made an impact not only as the first Floridian to play in the NHL, also the first Black American. Now, this is kind of bizarre. You would think by the early 1980s, because America has a lot of great black athletes, there would have been an NHL player already. Now, there was numerous black players, most notably Willie O'Ree and Walt McKechnie and Bill Riley, but they were Canadian born. So we're going to talk about his career a little bit, and some of the interesting paths, like I said, that Val took to make it to the NHL, including a chronology of his life that he published in a book from ECW Press. Now, Valmore Edwin James, born February 14, 1957, in Ocala, Florida, played mostly defense in pro hockey, but also skated as a left winger. Now, he played parts of 2 seasons in the NHL for the Sabres, where he played a small part in the rivalry with the Montreal Canadiens, and later on in his career with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, again, like I said, he's the first Black American to play in the NHL and the first Floridian-born skater to be in the show. Now, he was raised in Hopoge, New York, after his family moved from Florida. He was one of 6 children. He began skating and playing ice hockey in Comac, New York, where his father was employed as the manager of an ice rink. Now, his career included some nice seasons with the Quebec Ramparts of the QMJHL. Now, Quebec was known for taking chances on international players, both from Europe and America, put up some decent numbers in Quebec. Now, in 1976, he had 33 points in 72 games, including 14 goals. And in 77, he had 32 points, including 16 goals in 68 games. Now, this is where it gets kind of bizarre, ladies and gentlemen. He was drafted 184th overall by the Red Wings in 1977. He did not play with Detroit. Now, when he was playing outside of the Detroit system, he played part-time for Mississauga of the OHA Senior League in 1978 while working as a bouncer at a Toronto nightclub. So he goes from being an NHL draft pick to being a bouncer in Toronto. Very big guy, 6'2", 205. Now, Val eventually starts playing with Erie Blades of the NEHL, similar to what we're talking about Kerry Walker, playing as well. With Erie, he put up some good numbers, 40 points in 67 games in 1979, including 5 more points in the playoffs. Now, he played with Erie in 1980, 25 points in 69 games, then found himself in the Buffalo Sabres system. He played parts of 2 seasons with Rochester before being called up by the Sabres in 1982, where he played 7 games. Now, get this, ladies and gentlemen, this is kind of bizarre. He played only 7 games with Buffalo that year, but he wore 3 numbers, 26, 29, and 30, and it was kind of a running joke. I think he had appeared in one Hockey Night in Canada game, and one announcer says, "Oh, this is Val James, good prospect, first Black American," but last week he was wearing this number, now he has a new number, so it was kind of freaky. Now, he also played with St. Catharines in Newmarket of the AHL when he was in the Toronto system, and he was out of the NHL for about 5 seasons, but he came back in 1987 with 4 games and 14 minutes in penalties. Like I said, a very, very strong player, playing mostly combination of defenseman and some defensive forward. And like I said, a very consistent player, played with Rochester over 3 seasons before moving on to Toronto. 88, his last minor pro year, he played with the Baltimore Skipjacks of the AHL and the Flint Spirits of the IHL. Now, like I said, never played for Detroit, and in Erie kind of became a folk hero because he was one of the last proponents of the hip check. Now, it garnered heavy notoriety in the Erie County Fieldhouse, which of course home with the Blades. Now, when he signed with the Sabres in '81, after Detroit gave up on him, again, he was not the first black American to be exclusively trained in the country, and that milestone, of course, did not occur until '96 when Mike Greer made his NHL debut. And again, he was developed by a Canadian system, so technically he was a American-born black athlete, but not developed by the system like within the States. So he was within New York, but the wrong parts gave him, his bastion of starts. Now, in '83, while playing the AHL under the direction of rookie coach Mike Keenan, he scored a winning goal for Rochester to take the Calder Cup. So that's a great part of his resume as well. Now, when he made it back to the NHL in 1987, the same problems that a lot of black players have faced. He had a lot of, anti-black racism that were thrust upon him, not only in the AHL, but in his NHL games. He often faced situations at all levels of his career where he was the victim of incidents of racial prejudice by opposing fans and sometimes opposing players. Now, I saw James play, and James was a very consistent force on the ice. He had good skill, but you can't teach size. A very big player. The only person I can compare it with possibly is John Kordic, and this is why. James was not scared to fight. Now, he had several spirited bouts and victories over noted enforcers Terry O'Reilly and John Kordic, which were part, of course, of his record. Now, one of the NHL's all-time enforcers, Dave Brown, said James was one of the hardest punchers he ever faced and toughest opponents. Now, unfortunately, after only 14 NHL games, a recurrent shoulder injury forced James to retire from hockey in '88. Now, during retirement, he taught hockey for a decade before leaving sports altogether. Now, after retiring, he settled in the beautiful community of Niagara Falls, Ontario with his wife, working as part of a maintenance crew at a water park. He finally decided to chronicle his years in pro hockey with a very well-respected and regarded book, Black Ice, the Val James Story, which was released by the Ontario-based ECW Press for worldwide distribution in February 2005, which also coincided with that year's Black History Month. Now, in January 2007, ECW Press re-released the book in paperback format again coinciding with Black History Month. Now, the book itself, I've read passages, quite interesting. If you're a athlete of color, but an athlete that supports diversity in all sports, I would give it a read. James is a very well-read and learned guy. He did quite a number of interviews with the Buffalo and Toronto Press with the NHL, and he impressed a lot of people with his basically understanding of the role players like him had in the game. But James was very unique because he was almost like a throwback. You look at the 1960s style NHL players, not the greatest skater, but, he seemed to be very solid on the ice. Like I said, the only player I can compare him with, because that's the player that really did a lot for Montreal, with John Kordic. But if you're like an enforcer or a rugged defenseman or forward, when you got a shoulder injury, that's hard to come back from because your positioning. But I know his hip checks still resonate for the fans of the Blades, especially. And let me tell you something: when he hit somebody, people recognize his talent, because I think now hip checks are. I don't know why they're out of favor, but I love myself a good hip check. Because, it says, hey, you got me, So that's the story of Val James. If you like what we're doing here, give us a like, comment, and subscribe. I would suggest, if you're a fan of hockey books, to check Val's book out. It's been highly recommended amongst the media, my media colleagues in Ontario. And if you're a Toronto Maple Leaf fan, it talks about the era, a little bit of the late 1980s, when he came back up, and that's a kind of, I don't know, not say a lost era for Maple Leaf fans, but it's before, Gilmore arrived in, the partial cup run in '93, where, the bad call against Gretzky in his favor really hurt the Maple Leafs. Again, that's the Legend of Val James. Thanks for listening. Bye.